Well, hello everybody. I guess it's time to get started. I'm very happy that our guest speaker just rolled in the door 2 minutes ago. He was 30 seconds early, but he was coming from a long ways away and traffic was bad, so completely understandable. So my name is Rick Sterling and I want to welcome you to the monthly educational meeting of Voices for Justice in Palestine. We'll have a presentation by Professor Abukhalil of 45 minutes or 50 minutes or thereabouts, and followed by questions and answers. Professor Abukhalil grew up in Lebanon, where his father was active politically and served as Secretary General of the Parliament of Lebanon. He studied and received his undergraduate degrees at American University of Beirut. He then came to the U.S., where he received his doctorate in comparative politics at Georgetown University. He's written several highly regarded books on Saudi Arabia and bin Laden, on Saudi Arabia, and also another one on bin Laden and America's new war on terrorism. In 2003, after the invasion of Iraq, he launched the very popular Angry Arab News Service, which contained a very sharp analysis and continues today on X or Twitter, and he has over 200,000 followers. As'ad Abukhalil has been professor of politics at California State University of Stanislaus for, I believe, something like 30 years. Is that? 32 years, yes. He's also been visiting professor at UC Berkeley. Professor Abukhalil drove all the way from Monterey to be with us today.
Thank you.
Let's give him a warm welcome.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Testing. No. Testing.
No.
Yeah.
Testing. Well, good evening, everybody, and I am glad to be speaking about Palestine and Palestinians, especially in those times. I have lived in America since 1983 when I came for my graduate studies, and I never remember a time when there is more direct government intimidation of Voices for Palestine.
Yes.
This is a long-standing campaign, and it came to fruition in the last 2 years. And this is the irony of our struggle for Palestinians, is that when our voices need more than ever to be heard, it is when the federal government and Congress and various agencies have tried to silence our voices, when there has to be attention paid more than ever to the genocide and starvation inflicted on the Palestinian people. Make no mistake about it, it's become very difficult for people to speak out. If you speak to college students, I was speaking to one at Berkeley the other day, and they basically silenced all activities and expressions. The so-called freedom of expression Mario Savio Cafe in Berkeley was closed down. Rather tellingly, it needed to be closed down because there is no freedom of expression. And the Western media that for very long championed student activism of the 1960s and 70s suddenly decided to demonize activism for Palestinians. And the way it's being done, in the most sinister, wicked way, by conflating criticism of Israel and of Zionism with anti-Semitism, which is something we all need to stand against. Make no mistake about it, I consider myself one of those fighters against anti-Semitism. And I've always said in Arabic and English and other languages that we in the Palestinian justice community should never tolerate anti-Semitic voices in our midst. The cause is based on justice, on humanitarianism, on equality. And for that reason, we should be categorical in rejecting all voices of anti-Semitism in our midst. What they are doing, the Zionists are doing now, is a very dirty game by saying any criticism of Israel, even the rejection of Israel is not anti-Semitic. There are Orthodox Jews who, for religious reasons, reject the very existence of Israel. That's not anti-Semitic. If you believe Israel was created as it was, atop an existing Palestinian nation, it's not anti-Semitic. I mean, they are not going to control our discourse because that's what's being intended. They are trying to do what basically they cannot do in terms of silencing the people back there. The Palestinians have been struggling for over a century, and they have not given up. It is unprecedented that the Palestinians in Gaza for more than 2 years have been subjected to this Holocaust, and yet they have not surrendered. They have not raised the white flag. They have not rebelled as they were being instructed to do against Palestinian organizations that were fighting the Israeli occupation. I will tell you a personal story and then I will begin to speak academically. But before I do that, on the line about anti-Semitism, let's make it very clear. You can be anti-Semitic and pro-Israel and pro-Zionist. You can be anti-Semitic, and in fact, the Zionist lobby welcomes anti-Semites in their midst. Anybody believes that Donald Trump, with all the statements he's made about Jewish people, with what he said the other day from the Knesset publicly to Marian Edelson, is not expressing views that are anti-Semitic, associating Jews with money or questioning the loyalty of American Jews? This is typical, classic anti-Semitic tropes. But he's not being challenged because he is with Israel. Elon Musk, a blatant white supremacist and anti-Semite, he was forgiven because he made a trip to Israel and pledged loyalty to Netanyahu, and for that, he could do no wrong, no matter how anti-Semitic he can be in this pronouncement. And there are examples from early in history. American presidents, from Harry Truman, Richard Nixon, many of them were anti-Semites. And they supported Israel in many cases because they were anti-Semitic, because they wanted to get rid of Jewish people in their midst. In fact, early Zionists used that argument from Theodor Herzl when he wrote in 1897 Der Judenstaat. He said that we will arrange for the flight of Jews from Europe. He was really assuring anti-Semite. Balfour, after whom the Balfour Declaration was named of 1917, November 2nd, Balfour himself was anti-Semitic. In a speech he made at the House of Commons in 1905, he questioned the loyalty of Jews. So you can be anti-Semitic and pro-Israel and pro-Zionist. And Zionist lobby and Israel have no problem with evangelical Christians, most of whom support Israel out of religious anti-Semitic viewpoints.
Yes, that's right.
Similarly, you could be anti-Semitic and supporting of the Palestinians, like some neo-Nazi fringe right people, and we don't want them in our movement. I personally, categorically, reject them to sneak into our movement. We don't want it, and many of us say that publicly in Arabic and other languages I said. But you can also be not anti-Semitic and against Israel. You can be somebody who fights against anti-Semitism, and I count myself as one, and be categorically against the existence of an apartheid state atop an existing Palestinian nation from which ethnocide was committed against the native population. And similarly, you can also be supportive of Israel without being anti-Semitic. In no way I'm implying everybody who supports Israel is anti-Semitic. No, but there are, in other words, in summary, about this debate, this deceptive debate, there are anti-Semites on both sides. And, we should reject them. But to suggest that the movement of Palestinians is motivated by anti-Semitism is a viewpoint that ignores the history of the Palestinian problem. If those immigrants coming to Palestine in the late 19th century, 20th century, were Indonesian Muslims, if they were Catholics from Italy, they would have been rejected. The religion had no significance, no significance. If anything, without in any way portraying Islamic history in a Pollyannish positive viewpoint, I would say that there was coexistence. There's a new book by Professor Osama Maqdisi at UC Berkeley, historian, about coexistence under the Ottoman Empire. There were clearly discrimination occurring in the Islamic history, but to suggest there was the wholesale persecution and expulsion of Jews that occurred in France In Britain, twice over the centuries. And in many European countries, culminating in the rise of Nazism or in the pogroms in Russia, nothing like that happened in our region. And the evidence of that is that I grew up, I was born in 1960, there were Jews living in Lebanon and in all the countries around me. The viewpoints change over time for sure. I was born in 1960 without being personal. The chief rabbi of Beirut, who was a friend of my uncle, administered the circumcision of me and my brothers. There were none of that hostility, ideology of hostility against Jews like you have in Europe. None of that nature. Even Zionist historian like Bernard Lewis said in his book Semites and Anti-Semites that there was never in Islamic history something like racial, wholesale, mass hatred of Jewish people and exterminationist anti-Semitism that we have seen in Europe. I mean, if anything, after the Inquisition in Spain, we've seen the flight of Jews into Muslim countries. I mean, the picture have changed, obviously, because Israel deceptively and dishonestly, disingenuously posed itself as representative of Jewish people. I and many Jews reject that viewpoint. I do not in any way count Israel with its crime, with its criminal record from its founding in 1948, to represent world Jewry. In no way it does. In no way it does. I mean, if anything, look at public opinion surveys in America. What is it last week we've seen? 60% of American Jews consider what Israel is doing as war crimes. And 40% of American Jews call it what it is, genocide. Something that Bernie Sanders could not utter for more than a year and a half. And most senators could not utter that word. Kamala Harris was challenged yesterday about it, and she refused to utter that word. It is what it is. World experts from all religions are in agreement, unanimous agreement, what happened is genocide. We've never seen genocide live on the air like we've seen in this case. So it is not easy for me to speak about it because of my personal history. I was born in 1960, and I knew about the Nakba, the 1948 ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, by virtue of the existence of 400,000 Palestinians in our midst in Lebanon. They were living in squalid refugee camps, and they were not attended to, and the Lebanese state was put them under almost police control for much of the history until they revolted in the 1960s, and they only had a dream of going back home. If you visit them in refugee camps, you would notice instead of paintings, they would have keys to the houses from which they were expelled. And I hear Zionists when I came to America, which confounded to me. They would say, why don't they go to Saudi Arabia? They don't want to go to other places. It's like telling somebody in Kansas, you may not like Kansas, but they want to leave their home. Nobody would like to leave their homes. Their homeland is Palestine. They are insistent. They are dying because they refuse to give up on their attachment to their homeland. So I grew up knowing about the Nakba firsthand. When I was 67, when I was 7 years old in 1967, Israel struck at Syria, at Jordan, and at Egypt, and expanded, which was always part of the Zionist dream in the region. And they claimed to America at the time, look how history of Israel lies to the American people. They first claimed we did not fire the first shot. It was the Arabs. And the Israeli ambassador to Washington said that to Lyndon Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson immediately put an end to it by saying, we have the intelligence, we know you fired the first shot. So they stopped with that. But if you look at the early press coverage, as I have done in 1967, initially they went with that lie, but then it was exposed by the government as being a lie. In 1967, it was a traumatic experience for Arabs because Israel added to the tally of Palestinian refugees being driven from their homes. So the people of Gaza are 2 times or 3 times refugees. Original Palestine, from West Bank, and so on, and from parts of Gaza, and this has been their story. In the 1960s, the Palestinians tried armed resistance to occupation. And many Palestinians were competing. And Israel was responding with brute force and was killing them before there was even a PLO. If you look at the book by Benny Morris, Righteous Victims, Palestinians often, after 1948, would try to sneak in to check on their farms, to see their homes. And they would shoot them like pigeons upon sight. They were unarmed. Israel has a long history of killing Arabs that are unarmed. If anything, I mean, they started terrorism in our region in the 1930s. All the sinister tools and methods of terrorism that we complain about worldwide were started by the Zionists themselves. Bombs in crowded markets, bombs at café, letter bombs, bombs at embassies, car bombs. All of those were committed by Zionists. Booby-trapped ambulances, booby-trapped animals. They would put explosive on a donkey and send it to a crowded area. They did all that in the 1930s. They wanted to terrorize the population. Don't take my word for it. Menachem Begin, in his book, The Revolt, admits so much. Admits that Deir Yassin, which happened before the war of 1948, in April, was done killing innocent people because they wanted to cause the flight. But of course, most Palestinians did not flee on their own volition. They were kicked out of their land by force. Ethnic cleansing was committed. Ishaq Rabin, the longtime Prime Minister of Israel, admitted that in his memoirs, in the Hebrew edition. In the English edition, they cleaned it up for American liberal sensibilities. So there is a long history. And don't say the notion that I hear from American liberals, which really find it grating to me, that why can't the Palestinians try non-violent methods? They did try. From 1948 until the rise of the PLO, there were no methods of violence by the Palestinians. Take you all the way later into 1980s. I knew this Palestinian Quaker, Mubarak Awad. He was an advocate of non-violence. And I used to have arguments with him about the Palestinian, but he was a very decent, principled, passionate man. And then one time he told us he is going to end his struggle here in America and go where it matters. He established a center for non-violence in Jerusalem because he's Palestinian. What happened to Mubarak Awad? I mean, if I am not telling you a true story, you would say this is a work of fiction. The Israeli government accused him of terrorism and kicked him out of the country because they thought his advocacy of non-violence is terroristic. That's the record of the Israeli government. And now we go to the key moments of this conflict, which has lasted of over a century. The fact it has lasted, the persistence of the Palestinian question, is an indication of several things, which is, one, that the Palestinians do not understand the language of force, no matter how much mass violence, industrial scale violence you put on them. Hannah Arendt, the famous philosopher, was a Zionist herself, and she helped Jewish refugees in Europe. But she wrote an article in the Journal of Politics 1951 in which she said, she cannot understand, she said, how the Zionists do not understand that the only language Arabs do not understand is the language of force. Obviously it doesn't work. And yet, Zionists continue to believe that. We need to use more violence because that's the language we understand. Do you know that in 2003 with the invasion of Iraq, a key advisor to Dick Cheney, historian Bernard Lewis, whom I mentioned earlier, told the American government that Arabs understand only the language of force, and he said that in a National Review article as well. Well, obviously it didn't work in Iraq either, no matter how much violence they inflicted on the population. We still don't know the exact number of how many Iraqi civilians America killed. Why? Because there are estimates by the government of the United States, but they keep them classified. They don't release them. But we know this though. The Navy released figures which said by February of that year, they dropped more than 70,000 tons of missiles and bombs on Iraq, and that something like 70% of them were missed their targets. 70%. This in a book by Washington Post reporter Rick Atkinson. 70%. And what about the smart bombs? They don't use smart bombs. Even the Israelis. They use dumb bombs with the colored native population. because they're too expensive to use smart bombs. They use them for future wars. And this program of Lavender, using digital AI and so on to track and kill Palestinians with 15 to 20 on average civilians around him, that program used dumb bombs as well. So there's a long history. And the only way you can justify this mass scale of violence is by believing that they are not equal humans. They never believed that they are equal humans. One of the early Zionists of cultural Zionism, Asad, the famous guy who modernized the writing of Hebrew in the 20th century, visited Palestine at the turn of the century. And he couldn't believe his eyes. He said, you treat these people like animals. You hit them for no reason. You take their lands. You take their animals. You think they are dumb. He said they are smart people. They will know. They will figure it out. And they never assumed that they were able to forge or develop or crystallize national thinking just like Jews developed Zionism. They thought they are too inferior. And for that, they were throwing the word barbaric. You know, I wrote about it on Twitter the other day because it always rings a bell to me. Because Jared Kushner, in his speech in Israel, said it is something against barbarism or the barbarians. He said the struggle against barbarism. I mean, that rings a bell. We know what he's talking about if you have studied the conflict. The first one to use it about Arabs was none other than Theodor Herzl. Theodor Herzl used it in his book Der Judenstaat, 1896, the founder of Zionism. He said, we want to create an outpost of civilization as opposed to a place of barbarism of the native population. Take it all the way back to 2023 when Netanyahu said, this is a struggle against barbarians. And if you want me to list to you all the terms, the comparison to animals that was invoked by Israeli officials, I would be spending in a couple of hours here with you to list them all. You can look them up on ChatGPT or any other place like that. So, so there is a history of that violence. And from early on, we detect about the use of violence. When Theodor Herzl wrote his book, and in 1897, a year later, he organized the first Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland, he was asked, how are you going to go about your plan? There are people living there. And he quoted the French proverb, qui veut la fin veut les moyens. Who desires the end desires the means. They knew what they were doing. I mean, the Arabs could not be invisible. So, I mean, Zionists say what Mark Twain went to the Holy Land and said he didn't see anybody. Yeah, of course he didn't. Because these were people of color. They were not visible to him. They don't count. He meant I did not see white people like me. That's exactly what he had in mind. And Theodor Herzl wrote in his diaries, we want to push them into the desert. You know that lie they invented in 1967? That PLO leader or Nasser said, we're going to throw the Jews into the sea? That was never said. That was an invention of the Zionist lobby. But you now, in 2025, have become familiar with the blatant lies of the Israelis and their supporters. They really don't care about facts whatsoever. They absolutely do not. They invent things, they make things up. And as somebody said, all their accusations are confession of their own crimes. About killing babies, chopping their heads, and so on. These are things that happened actually during this war by Israel. And from early on, it's also Theodor Herzl. So whenever I see Trump and Jared Kushner speak about prosperity and the Gaza board and the economic development, real estate deal, all that, I know what they are talking about. This is not new to me. This was also in Theodor Herzl, in his writing. Theodor Herzl wrote that famous book, Der Judenstaat, but he also wrote a book in 1902, 2 years before he died in 1904, which is called Alt Neuland, the Old New Land, the Old New Land. In his book, he basically had an Arab token character, a token Arab character. He named him Rashid Bey. And in the book, they asked him, how did you accept, and he was imagining a Jewish state in the future. So they asked the Arab character, people in Israel, imagined Israel, how do you accept the Jewish state? And he said, oh, we accept it because it has brought us prosperity. In reality, it has brought misery, indignity, and slaughter to the Palestinians. In fact, in 1936, the Palestinians revolted in their first major revolt out of their desperation, economic and political. One, the Zionists established what they called Hebrew labor. Basically, that Jewish enterprises should not hire Arab workers. Second, as they bought the land, mostly from absentee Lebanese landlord that did not care about Palestinians, and don't exaggerate this issue of land sales, because by 1948, the Zionists did not own more than 7% of the entire land. So it's not in ownership of land by sale, it was actually by brute force. So the new owners of land, when Jews owned land, when they purchased it from Arab owners, they would not only take the land, they would kick the peasants out of it, which is new, because historically, the peasants always stayed on the land, even if ownership changed hands. So that made them more desperate. And it happened also in 1935 that people were unloading in the port of Jaffa, I think, and they saw a whole big campaign of smuggling of arms into Palestine. So the Zionists knew what they were doing from very early on, that we're going to do this by force, we're going to disregard the native population's opinion, we don't want their consent, we'll do what we want, we'll just bank on Western support. And Western support they got. I mean, Western leaders were anti-Semite, many of them, but they also hated Arabs and Muslims more. And because they were ignorant, just like they are today, many of them, they don't even know that there are Palestinian Christians. Yeah. And Palestinian Christians are the oldest Palestinians. Yeah. And believe you me, Palestinian Christians feel as strongly against Zionism and Israel as their fellow Muslim countrymen and women. Many of the most radical Palestinian organizations were founded by Palestinian Christians. George Habash of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Naif Hawatmi of the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And then came Balfour in 1917, November 2nd. All of us Arabs, we remember that day. Do you know, more than a century later, we still commemorate it? Do you know they still hold rallies in Palestinian refugee camps throughout the Middle East on that day? Because that's when the ultimate national insult was uttered by Lord Balfour. Lord Balfour issued his declaration in which he promised a Jewish home, a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. He didn't say where in Palestine. The Zionists lobbied for him to say of Palestine, all of it. And the British said, this is too extreme, they wanted to be cunning. So they said in Palestine. We'll fool the native population, they're not very bright. And in that declaration, they did not utter the word Palestinian at all, but they mentioned them. They called them the the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Do you see how odd that phrasing is? The Jews in 1917 were something like 9% of the population. I mean, you call the majority the non-Jewish segment of the population? I mean, it's like Americans are mostly Christians. It's like saying the non-Christian of the United States, right? That's not the predominant population. So they said, as for the existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, everything shall be done so that it being understood that they should have religious, civil and religious rights, but not political rights. Political rights only for one community, the Jews in Palestine. For the rest, municipal trash collection in their own communities. Civil and religious rights, but nothing political. The same thing that's happening right now. The West has not changed. So the roots of apartheid was planted in the Balfour Declaration of 1917 by saying we have two systems. And we have two people. And Balfour was not shy about it. Balfour was asked, how do you justify giving the homeland to the 9% of the population? And he said, you must understand, numerical self-determination was not a factor. Numerical self-determination. So it's not about numbers, it's about quality of population, the quality of the racial recipe. I'm using deliberately racial recipe. You know who used that term, this ugly term? Vladimir Jabotinsky, the founder of revisionist Zionism, the one who was the mentor of Netanyahu's father, and who became the inspiration for Netanyahu's movement of Likud. Numerical self-determination is excluded. The quality of the people is not the same. How else would you justify, how can you oppress them, kill them, mutilate them, and take their land? That's how you do it. You're saying they're subhuman. They're not like us. And in the recent agreement of Gaza, where the American government announced the agreement of 20 points, you know what they did not speak about self-determination for the Palestinians. That's a lie. Because the press said they spoke about self-determination. They didn't do that. They said they spoke about the Palestinian state. They didn't do that. They said a credible passageway to self-determination. So after more than a century, the Palestinians will have to wait for a credible passageway towards self-determination, and later maybe towards a state. But which state? What state? Today I was reading the statement that they issued in Egypt under the supervision of the United States government. It is absolutely monarchy. There's nothing there in that statement. There is nothing concrete. There is nothing about the political rights of the Palestinian people. It's all about self-praise by the US government and paying tribute to Israel and its own victims. Notice that Palestinians who are kidnapped in the thousands are not mentioned. They're not profiled in the New York Times. We don't know their names or faces. They don't matter. Did you know that the Israelis kidnapped an autistic teenager? Do you know a large number of the arrested, kidnapped by Israel were teenagers as well? Do you know there are more than 11,000 hostages held by Israel? Most of them without charges pressed against them? That's the record of Israel. They did that in Lebanon. I witnessed it in 1982. In 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon. The PLO resisted, but really ineffectively. They were not as good fighters as militarily capable like Hamas or Hezbollah in Lebanon much later on. So Israel arrived into Beirut, and they were bombing the hell out of the place. Even Thomas Friedman, who was an AP correspondent in Beirut, said that the bombing was indiscriminate. I mean, he only admitted that because he was there and he feared for his life. He wanted to draw attention in New York. And we lived in a middle-class neighborhood in Beirut. There were no military centers around us. There were no Palestinian guerrillas at all, not even within sight. And suddenly I was sitting with my mom, and she had visitors. And we kept hearing fighter jets roaring over our heads, and they were throwing bombs. But if you grew up in Lebanon, it's not unusual. I hate to say that. You gotten accustomed to it. They did it throughout my growing up years. So that time, the bombs kept getting closer, and I was cracking jokes with my mom. I was like, oh, they just hit the supermarket. Now they hit your hair salon. I mean, something like that. And then suddenly, I heard, and I grew up in the civil war of Lebanon. I'm very familiar with explosion of all types. I heard the loudest explosion of my life. To this very day, because of that day, I cannot watch war movies. It was that traumatic of my life. I will explain it to you in the few seconds it lasted. We were sitting in the living room, and there was this loudest explosion I've ever heard, and then accompanying the sound of explosion, just like visual effects in sci-fi movies, we saw a thick ray of fire and dust traveling from one end of the apartment to the very end, shattering all the glass in between. I mean, this was an experience that lasted seconds. I came close to death many times in Lebanon, and often at the hand of Israeli bombs around us. But I never in my 65 years of life on this earth ever wondered in my head, am I dead or alive? But during that moment, I remember exactly what I was thinking. Am I still alive or did I die? Because I saw my mom slumping on the floor immediately, lost consciousness. And fortunately for us, our building was not hit. People live over there, not in individual homes like here, but apartment buildings. The apartment building next to ours was hit with concussion bombs, which explode twice and then create vacuum, and then the building is flattened with everybody inside it. Obviously, we had to relocate to another home and then to another home and so on. But that's my first-hand experience. So I come to America and they tell me that we Arabs are the committers of terrorism. And I always bring that example to them. Was that terrorism? No, it's not. Because if you look up the rhetoric of Western countries, they never use the word terrorist with the State of Israel. With one exception. With one exception. When Zionist organizations were targeting British people, they were called terrorists by the time. They were called Jewish terrorists, blanketly, in newspapers, in government statements and pronouncements. But when they kill the native population, we don't matter. In my own lifetime, Israel bombed Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Iraq, Tunisia, downed a Libyan civilian airliner. I'm sorry? Qatar, no, this is before the war. This is my lifetime when I was growing up. And in the last year alone, Israel bombed more countries. Iran, Yemen, Qatar, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, obviously. And over the years, they also bombed Sudan, Somalia. I mean, the list is very long. I mean, this is a country, according to an Israeli book, Rise and Kill by correspondent of the New York Times, Ronan Bergman. They used to send us car bombs into our streets. They would send us booby-trapped donkeys, and they would detonate them from a distance. And you come here and you don't see anybody cares. And they call your side terrorists if they lift up their heads. That's where the dichotomy is. And that's why Arabs and support of the Palestinians cannot fathom Western rhetoric on this subject. And they lecture you about what terrorism is, and that Israel is a victim of terrorism. I mean, this is the biggest ploy that was played by Zionists in the world, to make the chief perpetrator of terrorism in our region as a victim of terrorism, at the hand of the victims, if they lift up their heads. And they will continue to lift up their heads. Do not believe what they tell you. Finished off Hamas, finished off Hezbollah. Even if they finish them off, you know what will happen? New organizations will take their places. New organizations will take their places. It's a matter of time. And believe you me, the new generation of Palestinian Arabs who's going to fight Israel in the future are going to be more militant, more radical, and more effectively violent against Israelis than the ones you are dealing with before. In 1982, Israel declared, Lebanon is settled. It's under our control. We're going to have peace with it. Within 1 year, Hezbollah emerged, and they started a campaign that resulted in the humiliating withdrawal of Israel from Lebanon. Now, let me conclude by saying a few words about it. What happened in the last 2 years is unprecedented. I choose, since I came to America and spoke about Palestine, and I've spoken in many places, college campuses in 40 states, and I've spoken at synagogues as well. I always maintain my composure and not to show emotions. I've always tell Arabs, we're not here to present emotion. We just want to present the facts and let the facts speak for themselves and evoke whatever emotions in the audience. But I will tell you, this has been a traumatic event in the lives of most Arabs who are suffering under governments that do not allow them to express themselves freely, and those governments are all supported, bankrolled, or owned by the United States government. Because democracy is anathema to the Zionist project. I mean, when Palestinians elected Hamas in 2000 and, when? 6? Earlier than 6, I think. 6. Yeah, when the Americans and the Israelis decided that we're not going to recognize this election. And this is why Lebanon is the freest, most democratic country in the Middle East, where there's more freedom of expression than in Israel or in America combined. Lebanon is a place where the most powerful armed group against Israel was created. It received severe blow by the Israelis, and they may not survive it. But believe you me, a new organization will come out. Just like it happened in 1983, 84, when Israel thought we solved the problem of Lebanon. People of the region cannot live, no matter how much you tell them otherwise, with the reality of an apartheid state that survives, sustains itself on perpetuation of mass violence on everybody around, on everybody. I mean, look at the record of violence by Israel in the last 2 years. And it happened under Democrat Biden, under Trump. It is bankrolled, it is sponsored, it is enabled by Western liberals and Western right-wingers and conservative, and Western leftists in some cases. If you look at some European countries, the Greens of Germany have a horrible record during the last 2 years, by far. Their foreign minister, remember when she justified targeting of schools and hospitals and killing of civilians? She is now the president of the General Assembly of the United Nations, but everywhere she goes, they bring that up. And she lies and denies that she said what she said on video, I would say that even if the dust settles, there is no peace in the Middle East. It is not going to bring you peace. Read the statement they made yesterday. I mean, it has nothing that could create the conditions of peace. There's going to be more war because Israel lives on violence and it continues to kill. A year ago, 11 months ago to be exact, Lebanon and Israel reached an agreement of end to state of aggression between the two countries. Every day Israel is killing Lebanese, every day. The other day, they bombed 300 tractors because they're trying to rebuild their homes. There are 200,000 Lebanese out of their homes in South Lebanon. And Israel and America are not allowing anybody to bring money to reconstruct. You see them. You see these displaced people. You hear their stories. I was in Lebanon for the whole summer, 3 months, this past summer. And one of the things about life in Lebanon today, which really bothers me a lot, you have a drone over your head non-stop, around the clock. And it really bothers me, because I take it personally. It has an annoying buzzing sound. Yeah. It is intended to intimidate you, to scare you, to tell you the Israeli monster is over your head and is willing to kill at will, and they do. And nobody speaks about that, about these violations. Israel has violated the non-aggression agreement more than 5,000–6,000 times already. As I said, on a daily basis, several times a day. Israel is not going to prevail by force. And the notion that it will survive as an apartheid, violent state is not going to go. It's not going to go. Force alone doesn't guarantee it. The archaeology of the Middle East is a testimony to the limitations of military power. There were many conquerors, successive conquerors, came one after the other, and many Arabs believe, just like the Crusaders created kingdoms in Tyre, my hometown of Tyre in South Lebanon, and in many places in the Middle East, they eventually were vanquished. They eventually were kicked out, and there is no traces of them today except remnants of fortresses that they built to shelter in them and to protect their military force, which kept them afloat. And for that reason, it's very important not to sink into despair. The suffering is immense. What the Palestinians went through by sheer numbers of casualties, and we don't know the exact number, I mean, it is at least 70,000. It is worse than Nakba. In Nakba, I mean, a lot of people died, but it's like maybe 5,000-6,000. But of course, they lost the homeland. I mean, that's a major loss. But what happened, the spree of mass killing throughout the Middle East by Israel and the bombing is very new in our lives. And that is going to have repercussions. And the repercussions are going to change the landscape of the Middle East. In 1948, things did not change overnight because of it. Nasser of Egypt, the famous Nasser of Egypt, the man who dominated the Middle East politics until his death in 1917, fought in the Palestine War, was devastated by what he saw. He waited 4 years. In 1952, he led a revolution in Egypt which changed the whole Middle East. And I expect things like that to occur, because the notion that Arabs will forgive and forget and move on is a dream by Zionists, because they believe that those deaths do not count. They count a great deal. And there are many people who are aggrieved and will want to take revenge in the future. I know that because this is the trajectory of the Arab-Israeli conflict. But one thing is for sure, public opinion in the United States is changing. And I hate to say this to you because I am one of those radical leftists like some of you. But I have more hope, not in the left in the United States. I've seen the Gang of Four in Congress, I've seen Bernie Sanders. I have more hope in the far right, America First movement. I mean, I don't mention their names because you and I disagree with them on all issues, from gender to gay and lesbian rights to anything else. But they have been more vocal, more brave than the timid Western left. Thank you all for listening.
I think, Victoria, did you want to tell people about the next event before?
If the professor doesn't mind.
Well, just for shortly, right? Very brief, yeah.
Let me just get a flyer back here. So
okay. We've got another event coming up shortly, and Victoria's going to tell you briefly about it before we go to the Q&A.
This is a flyer, and you're hopefully going to see it all over Rossmoor. There are 2 films that will be shown October 29th. Professor, we'd love to have you there. The 2 films, one is called Mary Under Occupation, and the other is Mariam, a Woman of Bethlehem. Just lost my mind. The other is Mariam, a Woman of Bethlehem. Both of these, it works.
Okay, good.
Christians and Muslims were interviewed in Bethlehem asking, who is Mary Mariam in 21st century Bethlehem? And 2 Palestinian actresses enact these stories of Mary Mariam, the mother of Jesus, the mother of Isa in the Quran. The stories reveal who Palestinians are. Y'all come. Peacock. 1 o'clock, October 29th.
So, that was a lot to digest. You're like a walking encyclopedia of knowledge. So impressive. And I appreciated your sharing your emotions. I'm sure you have a lot of questions for the professor. Please make them questions and keep them short and not make a speech. So, who would like to start?
I want to say something.
Okay, you're second.
Or ask something.
Professor, I wonder if you would comment on your last thing that you said was, where is the left? Would you comment on the use of Christian Zionists by Zionists in this particular siege of Gaza?
I'm glad you asked me that question because I want to make it very clear that people in the Middle East, and as I said, I was there for 3 months, and everybody's talking about Palestine and the West and the reaction. People, and I've lived here for 42 years, I know how many Americans have, many of you, I know many of you, have spent years advocating for Palestine. Some of you are Christians, some of you are Jewish, some of you are Muslims, and some of you are atheists like me. But I know there are many of you. You may not have been, you may not have power, you don't have PACs, you don't influence Congress, but I want to make it very clear to you, people over there really follow what you do, they really do. It is widely covered in the press, and they really are extremely grateful to people like you. And that really makes a difference. When I look at public opinion surveys, you should give credit to yourselves. Those of you who spent years speaking on Palestine when many of the people around you did not know what the word Palestinian mean. It took what happened on October 7th for people to start asking questions. Just like in 1968 when Kennedy was assassinated, Robert F. Kennedy, by a Palestinian, people started saying, who are these people, you know? So I just want to make that clear. On the question of the left, yeah, of course, there's extreme disappointment. I'm disappointed at the Arab left as well. The Arab left has been basically turned into NGOs. They are all serving the agendas of Western donors, and you have fake Western leftist organization like the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation of Germany, which is using the name of a great woman in order to poison the minds and the rhetoric and the agendas of the left in the Middle East, all in favor of coexistence with apartheid and genocide of Israel. Christian Zionists have become extremely instrumental, but I read a recent survey which may surprise you, that the changing public opinion has even affected Christian Zionists. There is now a group of Christian Zionists who have become more sympathetic to the Palestinians. I mean, when you see the numbers, that there are more Americans today sympathetic by a slight difference, but still more Americans sympathetic with Palestinians than Israelis. Do you know how weird that is for me? When I first came to America, it usually was 75% to 80% of Americans sympathized with Israelis, and usually 8%, 10% sympathized with Palestinians. This is 1980s. Look at the numbers now. Look at the numbers among Jews in America. So specifically, I did not know what they did, except they did some clowning and performances, things of that sort in Gaza. But of course, they've always been agitators for Israeli aggression. They did that in South Lebanon. When Israel was occupying South Lebanon, Pat Robertson sent TV stations and his people into the South, and they started to propagandize for the occupation. They have a long history of that. I mean, Christian Zionism is a major backbone of the pro-Israeli lobby in the United States. This is why our hostility to the lobby cannot be said to be anti-Semitic. I tell people, most of the work for the lobby in America have done by Christians. People like Obama, who committed $38 billion over 10 years to Israel, without any questions asked. Anyway. Yes.
Yeah, I had somebody else who had, somebody else had asked to speak
Oh, yeah, I'm
first.
sorry.
Well, I don't have a lot to ask.
Talk into the mic, please.
I don't have, the problem in this country is exactly that, with the American left. There's not an organized party. It's dispersed, it's ineffective, it's pathetic. And I am a leftist, and I've been a leftist for 75
Could you
years.
speak into the mic?
And I have functioned, and I go every week and I fight for Palestine, anti-Trump, all these things. And there's a lot of older women, older men doing the same thing. Will it be effective? Who knows? It doesn't seem like it. That's what's so sad. Because if Trump died overnight, he'd be put on a postage stamp. And another motherfucker would replace him. That's the truth. It's American political policy that will continue this. this, and there's not an organized left to fight it.
I think the biggest danger to the left, and I say this about my experience as a leftist activist in Lebanon, and as somebody who lived here and been familiar with the left, and I know about the Green Party, and they asked me to run for the US Senate, believe it or not, years ago, but I said no immediately, is that there's a poison of liberalism. The liberal agenda is the biggest danger to leftism. We have to draw boundaries. We have to distinguish ourselves as a left from the liberal agenda. The liberal agenda has historically been, in Europe as well as here, an agenda of occupation, of racism, of sexism, of all the bad things that we as leftists should stand against. I mean, yesterday I read the statement by Bernie Sanders, for example. You can tell I am such a not a big fan of this guy. I mean, you cannot read Bernie Sanders' statement about Israel and not conclude, this man is a blatant racist. There's no question in my mind. There is no question in my mind. He does not view both people equally. This man has voted on every bill in favor of Israel all his life. Don't believe this man changed. He's always been like that. This is a man who blamed Palestinians for every genocide or massacre they suffered. I have followed his career early on because I can see a leftist hypocrite when I see one. Anyway.
I was a member of the Democratic Party for over 50 years. I worked for Jerry Brown in his first administration until '79. I walked away 5 years ago. We've got to find the coalition where we come together. Christian Zionists, I think upwards of 50 million of them, diminishing rapidly as far as the pro-Israel stance. Do you know anything about the Scofield Bible and how that came about to create Christian Zionism? Are you aware of that?
I've read about it, but I'm not an expert, so I'll let you speak.
Well, I'll just say it for 2 minutes. Christian Zionism is a result of the Scofield Bible. Have you ever heard of it? See, this is all new to me now. I mean, I'm in the last year. The Scofield Bible was written by this idiot named Scofield, who claimed to be a minister, which he had no qualification, but he was groomed. He was groomed by the Zionists to write notes to explain the Bible, because you know, you read the King James Bible and you go, oh, what are they saying here? Well, he told them what they were saying. He was saying that until Israel is the capital of the world, or Jerusalem is the capital of the world, there will be no rapture. So that's where all the Zionism comes from. 50 million people believe that over the course of several decades. Well, maybe 5 or 6 decades. But that's where that comes from, I think, and it's an interesting study in its own. And I was wondering if you're going to say anything about the USS Liberty and how that whole played out.
You know, what's interesting about the USS Liberty, and many of us have met survivors. I'm sure some of you have met survivors of the USS Liberty.
There's very few left.
And correct, but over the years, I mean. But one of the interesting things about it is that, have you noticed how much more discussion of USS Liberty has occurred in the last 2 years? And not by leftists, guess by whom? People like Tucker Carlson and people like that on the right. But I mean, it's not the only, I mean, do you know when Jonathan Pollard was arrested and found to be a spy for Israel, the initial Israeli reaction was, oh, he's not a spy for us, we don't work for him. I mean, Israel always lies about these things. Yeah, anyway.
Who would like to speak? Yeah, ask a question, of course.
This could be a good hope, but I'd like to question about the race that's going to go on in New York with Mamdani, who is very pro-Palestinian at this point, and it's kind of an interesting coalition that he's getting with a lot of support from some of the New York Jewry. Do you think Mamdani could be possibly the spokesman to change thought or to educate many of us as to what's currently happening?
Well, I have to say that he is an unusually effective candidate. I've never seen anybody like that. I mean, he has a smile to every answer. He answers articulately and effectively. And I don't know if you probably haven't heard, but I was made part of the story of Mamdani when I was in Lebanon over the summer. You see, one day, I was awakened by all these emails from people I know in America because the New York Post plastered my picture on the cover of that day. Because they went and did research about his background. They discovered that when he was in Bowdoin College, which is a very good school, by the way, in Maine, and he was active in social for justice for Palestine. This was, we're talking about, what year was it, 2000 and maybe, he was still 2012 maybe, or 13. Anyway, so they were doing event on, for Apartheid Week about Israel. So they invited me to speak on the campus. And New York Post put my picture, and they were like, radical professor was invited by. So they always are looking for stories about Manna. I have been extremely impressed by his personality. I mean, he has a winning personality, and if he may win, it's because of that. It's more than charisma. He has pleasantness that very few of us are capable of maintaining in the face of the provocation and the intimidation and the onslaught from the Zionists and the bigots and so on. So that's amazing to me. However, the statement he released on the October 7th memory, I think was terrible. I think was outright terrible. The word Palestinian appears not once in that statement. So he's obviously going to make concessions. He's going to continue to make concessions into the election day. But from what I see now, despite all the millions being gathered against him, despite all the support for that sleazy opponent of his, Cuomo, he may be able to win. And I think his win will send reverberation that will really bother Israel. Imagine the Prime Minister of Israel commenting on an election of the mayor of New York City. What an insult! What an insult! Can you imagine?
Who has a question?
Hello. I just want you to go a little bit more in depth into your closing statement, that you have more faith in what's in the right, in MAGA, and I'd like you to just extrapolate a little bit about why you have faith in them.
I mean, I think, and I want to make it very clear, I'm speaking about politics here and effectiveness, and I'm speaking my view of whether a shift in US foreign policy will occur and at the hand of whom it will occur. Many of these people on the right that are speaking about Palestine are not in any way my comrades. For example, I listen to their statements very carefully, and I distinguish between them. I think that Candace Owens, for example, is anti-Jewish, you see? But for some reason, and let us not forget that many people on the right, the Christians, many of them have anti-Semitic impulses. So their hostility to Israel is motivated sometimes by anti-Semitism. I don't want them to be the spearheads of the movement at all. I don't want their agenda to prevail because we don't like anything they say. And some of them, not all of them, may stand for justice in Palestine for nefarious reasons, for the bad motive, for the wrong reasons. But I am saying, analyzing, as somebody who taught American politics all my life, I say, if there is going to be a shift in US foreign policy to Israel, it's not going to be by liberals. It's not going to be by leftists. It's going to be by America First strands that are questioning US support for Israel. I mean, don't forget, in the 1970s, the ones who dared to question, there's a book by former person, they dared to speak out, member of the House from Illinois, remind me what his name was. They dared to speak out. I'm sorry? Yeah. Somebody Google for me, it's going to bother me. They dared to speak out, member of Congress. They dared to speak out. 1980s.
Oh, 1980s.
Yeah. Just Google book, they dared to speak out. So anyway, during those times, the ones who dared to question American support for Israel were Republicans. This was the Republican of the WASP East New England types. These were, people like Pete McCloskey here in California. They were, what's the name? Paul Findlay. Paul Findlay. Yeah. So they were Republican. Richard Nixon, by the way. Richard Nixon in the 1960s was going around the world calling for even-handed American foreign policy in the Middle East. Now, of course, when he assumed power, he changed. I mean, it's like Obama. Although Obama did not really change. As you know, he was very close friend to Rashid Khalidi. And Obama was very close friend to Rashid Khalidi when they both were teaching at the University of Chicago. And later, Rashid went to Columbia. Rashid was my mentor and advisor when I was in American University of Beirut. So I asked Rashid about Obama. He said, people think because he was my friend that he was pro-Palestinian. He said, he was really sneaky. He said, we would spend gathering dinners, we'd go to wedding together. He said, he never said anything that would come back later to haunt him. He was very political. He would listen. He would meet a lot of Palestinians. They would bash Israel around him. He would nod his head, but he never said a word. So my point is, Republicans used to have many personalities that question. Charles Percy is another example from the 1970s and 80s. And later he became an enemy of chair of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate and so on. So now we have something new with the American firsters who are questioning American support for Israel. The danger of that, and the reason why I don't think they should be our comrade, I mean, personally, I would not go on a podcast with any of them. Because, as I said, for the wrong reasons, I suspected for many of them, and the rest of their agenda is really terrible. But where is the left? I mean, why are the few progressives in Congress, why have they, I mean, isn't it shameful about Alexandra Cortez supporting Biden and Harris all the way, despite their abysmal record, enabling genocide as it's occurring? For example, in 2006, when there was a war between Lebanon and Israel got a good beating in that war and really lost, at the end of the war, Bush ended that war. He told the Israelis, I gave you 33 days, I can't give you more. You killed enough, you destroyed enough, and you didn't win. I can't give you more. It was Joe Biden who established the precedent of giving no timetable for Israeli war crimes. So Trump built up on the democratic record of Harris and Biden.
Yep. Yes.
What are your thoughts about the hidden agenda of Blair and Trump and capitalist land development in Palestine, in Gaza?
Yeah, it's a very scary plan, by the way. It's going back to the early view of Herzl, that the notion that we can bribe our way into the region, and that if we can give some economic prosperity, they will change. That happened. Never happened. Dignity is more important. Isn't it in the Bible, not by bread alone? I mean, that's how people believe. I mean, Palestinians have been fighting for their dignity, not for living standards. Tony Blair is a hired gun by the UAE. He worked for the despot of the UAE, Mohammed bin Zayed. And he is working closely with the Israelis to try to erase Palestinian identity, to eradicate all semblance of the political aspiration of the Palestinian people, and instead create homes and so on. They say that it doesn't going to entail any ethnic cleansing or expulsion. Trump is committed to that in writing. But do you trust the words of Trump? So I am very concerned, obviously. And whenever I see Tony Blair, I suspect a massacre or a sinister plot or a bad plan. Yeah.
Hi, I have two questions, sort of a little bit different. One is, and we'll see if I remember them by the time I get to the end, and if not, that's only one question. But one is, I've heard recently some commentary about, and certainly this is not new, about that while Trump wants his peace plan, and that's why he was pushing for at least a ceasefire, even if it was borrowed, that Netanyahu needs to continue war. And I thought you might be talking a little bit more about how he might stop doing stuff in Gaza, but put more pressure on Lebanon and Syria. You did mention it a little bit, but I'm curious for you to say how you think that's going to go. And the other question was more about this country, and as I've been watching, the techniques being used under this administration against its own people, I've been going, gee, well, some of this is sounding familiar. It's like, gee, this has been happening over in places like the West Bank for a while, and of course to minority groups in this country for a while. It's not new. But I'm wondering if part of why the Christian Zionists might, or the more Republican side of the community might oppose what Israel is doing, is that they will start to see the similarities between the abuse of power in Israel, the so-called democracy, and the abuses of power in this country.
By Christian Zion. First, on the first thing, no, I don't trust what was agreed upon. The agreement of the 20 points was too vague for me. And when they say credible passageway to self-determination, and I don't take it seriously. I know they are just, trying to deceive the public with these words. But Israel's war continues. Israel hasn't stopped. Today they killed 8 Palestinians, and today they bombed Lebanon, and today they bombed Syria. And don't forget what has been happening in the West Bank. The media has not been reporting. I saved this from an Arabic newspaper. Since October 7th, Israel or Zionists is responsible for 77,154 attacks, resulting in the murder of 33 Palestinians. The settlers established 114 new settlements in the governorates of Ramallah, Beirut, and Hebron. The occupation stole from Palestinians 55,000 dunums of land, and they established 25 demilitarized zones around their settlements. The occupation legitimized 11 previously illegal occupation centers and established 22 more. The occupation destroyed 1,014 homes of Palestine in the West Bank and delivered notification of intention to destroy homes of 1,667 homes. So this has been the record. And you add that to the record of Gaza, 76,639 of the murdered and the missing, more than 10,000 of them. 67 people who have been killed, arrived to hospital, 9,500 missing, 20,000 plus are martyred children, 12,500 women martyred, 9,000 mothers were killed, 22,000 fathers were killed, 220 days of closing passage of food, 540 martyrs of people who work in relief, 128 targeting of convoy of food, more than 230 journalists killed, 40,000 infants who are facing death because of lack of milk. Anyway, and the list is long. Whether Christian Zionists are going to wake up to the reality, I don't know. I don't have high hopes for that. Please.
There was a, hold on, there was a part 2 to the question. Did you want to address that? Or?
Yeah, I said.
Okay. All right.
One question at a time.
In talking about atrocities in the West Bank just now, one thing that concerns me a lot is the way they've been carving up the West Bank and destroying possibilities for reunification. Would you comment on that, and where is there hope for a Palestinian state being established?
I mean, first of all, I am glad to say I've always opposed the so-called two-state solution, because it's not a solution. It's a perpetuation of an injustice. But you're right. Even if you want a Palestinian state next to Israel, where is it going to be? Israel killed gradually and repeatedly and systematically any possible contiguity for a Palestinian entity. Not only between Gaza and West Bank, but even within the West Bank itself. It's all cut into small batches and pieces.
Who hasn't asked a question yet? Let me to you. Karen.
I'm thinking about people's non-understanding about the word liberal in this country, and that, and why you would say that people like MAGA people and right-wing people might be the ones. And I know that they want America first, and they don't want us in wars spending our money. A lot of these people are rather poor people in the South, and they don't want our money being sent out for Israel, who's another foreign country, or for Ukraine, which is another foreign country, or for any of these. So I think, could you clarify that a bit more, what and why possibly, that we don't take any binary thinking of one side being so wonderful among the right and the I don't call them the left, but the neoliberal class who are somewhat leftist, or I call them self-progressive or leftist.
Well, I mean, in no way I said or intended to say that they are wonderful. I'm speaking about political effectiveness. I mean, look at the government in power today. Wouldn't you say Republicans are far more effective in implementing their agenda than cowardly, intimidated Democrats? Yep. Look at the Democratic leadership of Congress. They are not pushing back at all. They are not fighting for justice. I mean, the quality of the opposition and the leaders of Jeffries and Schumer is pathetic. Compare that, look how the Republicans, when they are in opposition, they are unrelenting, they are fierce, they are uncompromising, principled. They are principled. The left is not principled.
No.
From Obama to Clinton, I mean, those two rose largely by selling out to the other side.
Exactly.
Joe?
You said you oppose a two-state solution. What would be your solution?
I want basically the right of all Palestinian refugees and their ancestors to be able to return to their homes and compensated. I always wanted a place where there is full equality, true democracy, Jews, Christians, and Muslims living together. Hopefully in a secular state, where there are no rights trampled on, and when the injustice of 1948 is reversed. I mean, something like what happened in South Africa. There were no recriminations, there were no revenge. Forget what Elon Musk and his fellow white supremacists say about South Africa. I mean, it was a very peaceful transition that they made. We need one like that in Palestine.
We have time for a few more questions.
So thank you. What you just spoke gave me some hope, at least ideally, for a potential solution. But I want to emphasize that's a potential solution. For decades and for centuries, what you've spoken about is just terrorism in all quarters. America is guilty of that as well. We've terrorized the American Indians, we've terrorized the African Americans, constantly, so we're just as guilty. We talk about freedom, we talk about how wonderful we are, but we have not really faced up to who we are. Right. So my question is, where is the accountability globally going to take place? the international law in The Hague has charged Netanyahu with war crimes. There's no punishment, there's no coming after him, there's no authority. And so, you know, my father, who died in 1974, said to me, and he was quite a scholar, and I had the pleasure of having someone like him to talk to throughout my teenage years. And he said, and this sounds a little bit like a joke, but he was serious. He said, if humanity cannot solve its problems, perhaps the UFOs will come, and they will, you know, but even more realistically, the Earth will die before we solve these problems.
Yeah.
And that's what Jane Goodall is talking about. She says hope is really, we have to see each other as one humanity, that we're ruining our Earth, and that we will not have a home. You know, she said in her last interview, she said, I want Musk and Trump and Netanyahu and Putin to go on one of Musk's rocket ships up to Mars, and then we can maybe solve some of these problems. So, you know, I'm looking for some hope. I mean, it's not going to happen in my lifetime. I have grandchildren. Would like to have a future for my grandchildren.
I just want to say yes.
And I look.
No, personally, because I really am the product of a trauma that was inflicted on Lebanon by Israel throughout my years in Lebanon, and later when I used to visit. I totally believe in hope, and I am stubborn in my belief. We have no choice. And I also believe that we have sometimes to compartmentalize in order not to sink into despair. I mean, it has been very difficult to watch the daily carnage in Gaza all the time. But I always tell myself, we cannot sink into despair. We have to create a collective movement, and that doesn't happen if we all surrender to the injustices that are occurring. Why do I have hope? Because Israel, for over a century, never prevailed by extinguishing this movement or that movement or using massive force. Something new always comes out. And second, the Palestinian people have a long record of not giving up, not giving in, and not surrendering to the Israelis. And the language of force does not work with the Palestinians. Thirdly, the changes and the shift in public opinion, especially in the United States. This was the last place on this earth that I expected justice will prevail in their view about Palestinians. And I saw that in the last year. Let's hope it will continue. And it is the work of all of us that it will continue. By bringing light into the reality of the Palestinians and their misery, by continuing to holding sessions like we do, discussing with our neighbors and with our friends and strangers sometimes about what Israel has done and the responsibility of the United States, by fighting against the forces of imperialism, the United States and the lackeys in Europe and so on. And also, there is also hope in the fact the Zionist project is not working. Israel is very strong, has a lot of weapons, but the business model is not working at all. In fact, it is working less than it used to, because it is based on the necessity to sustain it. You need to inflict more and more mass violence. You see, and that's how you destroy yourself as a power. You cannot continue to increase the scale. Towards what end? I mean, in this particular war, if it wasn't for America's direct military involvement with Germany and France and UK, Israel would not have prevailed in this conflict. It would not have prevailed. If American policy shift, Israel will not be able to continue as the apartheid genocide state that it is. So we need hope. What is it? Optimism of the will, pessimism of the mind, as Gramsci said. And I also believe personally that despite what's happening in the injustices, because we, as people who fight for justice, tend to be more sensitive than other members of humanity. But on the other hand, I always say to compartmentalize, so that we are also entitled to live happy lives. And we don't help the Palestinians if we live miserable, unhappy life in light of what we see and what we consume in terms of the news and the books we read and so on.
Can we take one final question from Donna?
Well, she can do it, but I want to give a plug afterwards. Can I do that?
I
I just was wondering if the reason that the Schumer and the left are so ineffective is because they're afraid they'll lose funding.
That's a very good question. I think that the liberals, the Democrats, and the left are not politically defiant or fierce, not like their enemies, the Republicans. There is also the question of funding, for sure. I mean, the role of AIPAC in all these congressional campaigns is known by all of us, for sure. Thirdly, I really think that liberals and Democrats want to appease segments of the population, especially the Democratic candidate, because they feel they are losing, and they are losing, white males. And in the campaign, in the attempt to win them over, they try to incorporate element of the Republican agenda. Notice this campaign against immigrants, for example. There's barely any grumbling about it among Democrats. And notice that the Biden administration started it. I mean, it went full force under Trump, but it really started under Biden. And also look at the fight against illegal immigrants under Obama. So there is a trajectory, a spectrum of which we on the radical left should not be part. Thank you all for coming.